For my top 3 this month, people have told me last month that I was maybe a bit too aggressive. So I thought this month I'm going to be...
Who was it? Who said this?
Well, I heard that. I thought I'm going to be a bit more positive and tell about 3 positive stories which I've seen across the world. Some of them are not new, but I think would be a good example of things which we might be well versed to develop further in the future. So
again, 3 positive stories about water.
About
or just positive stories.
No, it's positive stories about something
about the
specific.
marriage somewhere.
It is positive stories about clever uses of water networks and specific water networks. And my number 3 is in France. And usually I'm the one shitting on my own country, but for this time I will be positive. I will even be positive about the city which I hate to the guts, which is Paris. So they're not the only ones. There are many other places in the world which start doing that. But Paris has put a system in their sewer because they noticed that their sewer is one of the largest in the world. I mean, one of the oldest in the world as well. And that it is probably underused and under-leveraged in terms of what it could be doing. And so they've put now 2 of these systems, but the second is just one system. The first is pretty spectacular because just underneath the city hall of Paris, they've installed a system in the sewer with a heat exchanger, and they are collecting heat from the sewer and they are heating the building of the town hall of Paris. So one of the most prestigious buildings in Paris. 30% of the energy of heating comes from the sewer. And that is a clever way to tap into the heat trapped in the sewers, which you see sometimes in wastewater treatment plants where they're doing heat exchanger and sending a bit back some heat to the neighborhoods. But at that scale and in such a prestigious place, imagine entering that beautiful building and thinking that the heat you're feeling comes from shit.
Yeah, I mean, that means your president organizing the heat in the building for the secretary if he goes to the toilet.
The town hall of Paris, it's not the president, it's the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo. But yeah, you're right. So you're shitting, you're helping the town hall.
How is that from the technical perspective working?
Well, you have some strains which are removing the big parts, and then you're driving this polluted dark water or gray water because you have the strains.
Well, it's still black water, but separated from...
And then it's a heat exchanger, which means the difficulty...
Is that enough?
It's a heat pump, so you're taking up...
I mean, we are delivering somehow our P is around 38 degrees.
In terms of temperature, there's 2 elements at play, which is what we are giving out, but also the fact that there are lots of organics inside, which means that there's a fermentation at play. What happens in the digester happens to a certain scale in the sewer.
It's not only in heat exchanger. There's also a kind of anaerobic.
No. It is fully a heat exchanger. I'm just saying that the sewer itself, given it's a slow flow, it is a covered thing. It's also building some heat. I mean, historically, if you look at one of the most famous books of France, which is Les Misérables from Victor Hugo, there's a full section of that book which happens in the sewer of Paris, because at that time, if you were poor and you had a hard time finding a place to live, living in the sewer was pretty convenient because it would be warm, you would be protected from the rain and all that stuff. So there is heat in those networks, and I never took the time, and it's my mistake, to double check that calculation from Aaron Tartakovsky, but he shared that on my podcast when he was my guest. He said that according to his calculation, if you take the heat of the wastewater in the US and you take what you could extract, you could power all the electric vehicles on the roads of the US. There is an untapped potential with the heat of our sewers. And actually, I met with Hunziker Betatech, so engineering office in Switzerland, and they did a study which in between, I think they published. Their study was looking at what happens if you tap into the heat of the networks, because they were trying to double check if there's no negative effect. Because if you go to a wastewater treatment plant in the winter, it works a bit less good than in the summer because it's a bit too cold. So they were afraid that if you take out heat out of the sewer, it would be having a bad effect.
Even more worse, yeah.
But what they proved is that it was really neglectable, because the little heat you're taking out with your heat exchanger is nothing compared to the big mass of water which is going to a wastewater treatment plant. So that sounds like a clever thing, which comes with its limitation, because you need to backwash your heat exchanger because it can get clogged and stuff like that. But yeah, 30% of the town hill in Paris. So if you ever visit, you have to feel that special thing in the air. So that's my number 3. Number 2 takes us to Hong Kong. I remember when I was in Hong Kong, it's a while ago, I had to go to the toilet at some point, and I was very surprised to see that the toilets were sealed. It was the first time in my life that I saw that the flush was sealed. You could not open it. It was impossible. There was like a lock. So I thought maybe they had a bad experience in that hotel and that's the reason why they put a lock on it. Okay.
You could not open what? Where the water was stored?
Yeah. You cannot open the reservoir of water.
Yeah.
It is really locked. So I thought that's a weird hotel, but who knows, maybe that's the norm. And then I went on to with my days in my week, and then I went to the toilet again in a different place, and it was sealed as well. So, twice in a row, but why not? Maybe it's a custom here. And at some point I raised the question, said, why are they all sealed? And the reason why they are all sealed, it's because the flush of the toilets in Hong Kong is done with seawater. Meaning that inside the city of Hong Kong, there are two networks. You have the potable water network and you have a network of seawater, which is there to flush the toilets because they were facing some water scarcity. Plus Hong Kong is a very dense city with limited access to water. So one clever way, instead of doing potable water to flush the toilets, it comes with other challenges because
double network.
That
is the issue.
It's pretty corrosive and it places a special burden on your wastewater treatment plant because at the inlet of that wastewater treatment plant, you have partially salted water, which means that the bacteria you have inside your activated sludge, which they have there, it's special bacteria, which develops in time. They didn't do like special seedings of the bacteria, but it is not the same biology than the one you would see in a regular wastewater treatment plant if we go out in Europe or something like that.
But that reminds me a little bit to the grey water in general, right? The grey water is a perfect concept to use used water from the shower or from the hand basin to get reused to use it for the toilet. So it's a perfect system. The issue is for existing building, you need a double network because if you have a new build, then you can organize it, right? You can organize it, you collect that, and then you transport that back, and then you flush the toilet. But if you have a building like the one we are here in, right, which is a little bit older, and if you want to have a grey water system over there, it doesn't work really. Or let's say it can work, but it costs a lot. To open all the walls, to put another pipe into that, doesn't make any sense from the commercial perspective. So that means for me, all the hotels, so let's say all the new buildings in Hong Kong, they are directly equipped with a double network that they can flush the toilet with that.
And that started in the 70s. So a lot of the buildings got equipped over time.
I know, for instance, that in the UK, especially in London, that all the new buildings, they get an award if you have, these kind of windows, these kind of solar panels and things like that. And then you get a kind of award and then you get funding, blah, blah, blah. And one of that is really that you have a grey water system. So you put a grey water system inside the basement, and then you get the water and you put it back to the toilet, and you get another star and you get another funding. So it makes sense for new building, but for existing, it's still a big issue.
Sometimes it's even mandatory nowadays. If you look at San Francisco, Austin, a bit of portion of New York, now you have to have this grey water reuse inside the building, assuming the building has a certain size. And if you don't know where to fit that, you should reach out to a piping company, but that was a free advertising space. No, but you're right. It is more something for the new one. So you were speaking of double networks. And actually that leads me to my number one. Because my number one is not a double network. It's a triple network. And actually it's a system called Aqua Revo, which is something which is developed in the new suburbs of Melbourne in Australia. What they have is that they have one potable line, so the traditional line, one reclamation water line. So that's water which goes to the wastewater treatment plant, gets treated, and then comes back in a specific network. And they have a third network for stormwater. So they really have these three different networks and each is fit for purpose. Now, Aqua Revo is, let's say, the latest development of a trend which is much older in Australia, because in Australia, they have this tradition of the pink pipe. So they have pink pipes. And you see it a bit everywhere. Like you have a garden where you have the water flowing to the house. And then in the garden, you have a pink pipe coming out of the ground with a pink water meter, and that water is actually reused wastewater. So they have a specific network for reclaimed wastewater. When they started doing that, the promise was you're going to get water cheaper than the potable water. Well, that didn't hold the test of time. Nowadays, that water is almost the same price than potable water. But if there's a drought, which didn't happen for some years, but happened during the Millennium Drought, for instance, in Melbourne, and will probably happen again in the future. If there's a drought, you are not authorized to water your garden with potable water, but you will never be prevented from watering your garden with your pink
So you
pipe.
had to use the other one, the
Yes.
reclamation water.
That's the interest to getting
Reclamated water.
to get that reclamation water. And I think that's an interesting best practice, which is really
So you get two pipes to your whole house.
Yep.
That means you get a fresh water and you get a reclamation water. So you get it from the utility. It's kind of wastewater, which is reused,
Yes.
kind of from black.
Yep.
Okay.
You have actually two Australian companies which are almost a 50-50 in the market. One company does the really small developments up to the middle size, and the other company does the middle size up to the big size.
And how does it work? I mean, I get the two pipes, right? So I have my house. I build a house and I have these two pipes, and for sure I take the fresh water for showers and hand basin, and I take the pink one. Is it the pink one?
Yep.
Yeah. I take the pink one for my toilet to flush the toilet
Yep.
and for irrigation purposes.
Yep.
So that means they have a centralized kind of gray water system. I
It's-
know
it's a bit more complex.
it's overused, the word gray water, right? It's not really gray water, but the system, the idea with the gray water inside your house is that to reuse the water. And here you get it centralized.
My reaction was not for gray, but for centralized. It's not centralized. They have centralized potable water. So basically, when you build 20 new houses, you connect the 20 new houses to the existing central network of potable water. But you build a specific small-scale wastewater treatment plant, which you put at the center of that new neighborhood. I mean, you connect all the houses
It's wastewater.
to the wastewater,
Yeah.
and then it gets treated, and then it goes back to the houses, which means it's centralized potable water and decentralized reclaimed water, but decentralized not in your basement, decentralized in your neighborhood.
Yeah. Okay.
So it might be a continual, like what we've seen 2 months ago,
Yeah.
or it might be a small building with a small. Usually, it's an MBR followed by a disinfection,
Yeah.
and then it goes back as reclaimed water. And there's even in the city of Sydney, they are doing sewer mining.
What?
The first time ever I saw that. Pretty conceptual. They're saying some of these buildings are not equipped to reuse water, but the new ones can be equipped with an overcapacity compared to the size of the building. So instead of just reusing the wastewater which is produced in the building, they might as well pump water from the sewer and reuse it within the building. They're using the sewer to mine water and to use it as a source of water to feed their MBR and then UV, and then being reused in the building or around the building to irrigate the plants in the
Who's
city.
operating all these things? Is it operated by the utility?
Not so much, but that's also
Because if you say, for instance, that they have a decentralized wastewater treatment plant somewhere in the neighborhood and they get these pink water from there, who's operating this decentralized one? Who's responsible for that? The neighborhood?
It can be, on very rare cases, the neighborhoods, but that's not the common thing. The common thing would more be that you have some purely operating companies, and you have also the companies building those stuff, which then also operate it, like a BOT or a DBO. Or I mean, if you recall what Baldassar said.
Yeah, but who's paying that? I mean, is it even then, if it is a company from the industry, who's paying for that? For sure, in the end, the neighborhood, but let's say...
It is financed by the building company. Like when you build the house, as part of the asset within the house, you will also sell then to your end customers the fact that you have a double system of piping networks. And so it is part of the house package.
But the city has nothing to do with that.
Keep in mind, it's Australia. Australia is a very liberal country where you don't have that much coming from the states and from the federal state and from the local states. It's really a lot of delegation of public service. So it is not that surprising that the central utilities don't do so much with that, even to the point that when these companies started mining the sewer, the central utilities have reacted by changing their tariffication. Because, when you do your tariffication, there's a fixed thing for the fact that you are linked to the network, and there's a variable thing, which is how much water you discharge.
True.
And they increased the fixed charge so that if you mine the sewer, it's not that interesting because anyways you have to pay for your connection. But still, in terms of sustainability,
where does the water from the decentralized wastewater treatment plant goes to? To the centralized one? Or is it 100% recovery?
No, it's not 100% recovery. Most of the time they aim for 50% recovery, sometimes above that.
And the rest goes to the local sewage network?
It can go to the local sewage network. Sometimes they have special discharge or special ways to...
Or they truck it. That would be the alternative.
No, I don't think they truck it. I think it's just a matter of doing a smaller sized network from there to the traditional one for real, the deep black stuff which comes out.
But even here, it just works, this pink model, just for new retails, right?
It works much better for new ones. Clear. There is always a possibility to a certain extent to refurbish if the building has been designed rightfully with some free space where you can put some pipes. But yeah, you're right. It's mostly for new builds. That's why it lends itself pretty nicely for developing countries because they don't have the existing infrastructure, but also expansion countries. Because Australia, all the big cities of Australia expect to double their population over the next 20 years.
Well, I think they have enough space, huh? Do they?
They have space. Sometimes they don't have water. So they are solving the water problem while leveraging the space. So 3 positive stories. And I think also 3 things which can be inspiring because I guess mining the sewer for heat is something which you can be doing pretty everywhere. So it's a matter of economics of it. It would be interesting to do an economic calculation. The seawater special thing is an additional network and the same for the pink additional network. But still, it's something when you're building new, why not thinking of that in the first place?
The question is, where can you really apply that? If it is new, new area, but let's say if there's just one new house over there, then it is tricky. If you build NEOM, for instance.
If you're adding new houses inside an existing place, it can be a way to alleviate the burden on the network. Maybe the network is already at capacity. If you put a reuse system in the underground of that building, maybe you can also limit the impact it has on the network. So there are different shades and different scales at which it works.
But that would be a little bit go against all these grey water companies which come to the market because they want to sell their centralized private household solutions.
I think it's complementary. It depends. If you're in a new neighborhood, it would go for this decentralized lot. If you're one building inside an existing township, then it would make sense to have something in your basement.